The darkness had swallowed her whole 3 days ago, and Priscilla Ashford was beginning to believe she would die in this earthen tomb beneath the abandoned homestead. She pressed her palms against the rough wooden door above her head for the 1,000th time, pushing with what little strength remained in her trembling arms, but the heavy beam wedged across the outside held firm. Her throat burned from screaming, her voice reduced to a rasping whisper that barely carried beyond the confines of the root cellar that had become her prison. Fairplay, Colorado had seemed like such a promising place when she arrived 6 months ago in the spring of 1878. At 22 years old, she had come west to teach at the small schoolhouse, leaving behind the crowded streets of Philadelphia for the promise of mountain air and a fresh start. The town sat nestled in the South Park Basin, surrounded by towering peaks that turned purple at sunset. She had fallen in love with the wild beauty of it, the way the aspens shimmered gold in autumn, the crisp bite of winter giving way to meadows carpeted with wildflowers come summer. But beauty could hide danger, as she had learned too late. 3 days ago, she had been riding her mare back from visiting the Miller family, whose youngest daughter had taken ill with fever. Priscilla had brought soup and medicine, staying until the child's temperature broke. The sun was setting as she started home, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. She had noticed the homestead as she passed, remembering that it belonged to the Hendricks family who had abandoned it last winter after a harsh season drove them back east. Something had caught her eye, a flash of movement near the barn, and her curiosity got the better of her good sense. She had dismounted to investigate, thinking perhaps someone was squatting on the property. Before she could call out, rough hands seized her from behind. She caught a glimpse of wild eyes and a scarred face before a cloth was pressed over her mouth and nose, reeking of something chemical and sweet. Her consciousness faded as she struggled, and when she woke, she was in the darkness. The root cellar was perhaps 8 feet square, carved into the earth and lined with stone. Shelves along the walls held dusty jars of preserves, their contents long since spoiled. The air was thick and musty, cool but not cold in the July heat. A few potatoes had sprouted in one corner, their pale tendrils reaching blindly for light that never came. She had tried everything. She had screamed until her voice gave out, beaten her fists bloody against the door, searched every inch of the walls for another way out. Nothing worked. Her captor had come once, on the second day. She had heard the scrape of the beam being moved, seen the blinding shaft of daylight as the door cracked open. A gruff voice told her to stay quiet, to stop making noise, or she would regret it. A canteen and a hunk of bread were tossed down before the door slammed shut again. She had gulped the water too quickly, making herself sick, but the bread had helped settle her stomach. The canteen was empty now, her tongue thick and cottony in her mouth. She did not know why she had been taken or what the man wanted. Ransom seemed unlikely since she had no family with money. The not knowing was almost worse than the captivity itself. Her mind conjured terrible possibilities in the darkness, each more frightening than the last. She had tried to stay strong, to pray, to believe that someone would find her. But after 3 days, hope was a flickering candle in a windstorm, guttering and fading with each passing hour. The sound came suddenly, cutting through her despair. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, moving fast. Voices calling out. Priscilla's heart lurched. She summoned what remained of her voice and cried out, a broken croak that barely qualified as sound. She grabbed the empty canteen and banged it against the door, the metallic clang echoing in her prison. Again and again she struck, ignoring the pain shooting through her wrists, pouring every ounce of her remaining strength into making noise. "Someone's here." The voice was male, deep and urgent. "I hear something. Help, Priscilla's voice cracked. "Please help me." Footsteps pounded overhead, multiple sets converging on her position. "Where are you, root cellar?" "I'm in the root cellar. Stand back from the door." The command was sharp but not unkind. Priscilla scrambled backward, pressing herself against the far wall. She heard the scrape and crash as the beam was thrown aside, and then the door was wrenched open. Sunlight flooded in, so bright after days of darkness that she threw her arm across her eyes with a cry of pain. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her eyes struggled to adjust. "Easy now, we've got you." The voice belonged to the silhouette blocking some of the light, a broad-shouldered figure descending the wooden steps into the cellar. "How long have you been down here?" "3 days," she whispered. "Please, I need water." Strong hands gripped her arms, gentle despite their obvious strength. As her vision cleared, she found herself looking up into a face that was all hard angles and weathered bronze skin. The man was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his dusty shirt. His eyes were an unexpected shade of blue-green, like mountain lakes in summer, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Can you stand?" he asked. "I think so." But when she tried, her legs buckled. The 3 days of near starvation and dehydration had taken their toll. Before she could fall, his arms swept beneath her, one under her knees and one supporting her back. He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. "I've got you," he said again, and something about the certainty in his voice made her believe it. He carried her up the steps and into the glorious assault of afternoon sunlight. Priscilla blinked against the brightness, slowly making out the scene around her. 4 other men on horseback surrounded the homestead, all wearing the hard, watchful expressions of men accustomed to trouble. Her rescuer walked with her to the shade of a cottonwood tree and lowered her carefully to the ground, propping her against the trunk. "Jake, bring the canteen," he called out. One of the mounted men dismounted quickly, bringing water and what looked like jerky wrapped in cloth. "Slow sips," her rescuer cautioned, holding the canteen to her lips himself. "Too much too fast will make you sick." The water was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but his firm hand controlled the flow, letting her have only small amounts at a time. When he finally pulled it away, she wanted to cry from the loss of it. "More in a minute," he promised. "Let that settle first. Can you tell me your name?" "Priscilla Ashford. I teach school in Fairplay." Recognition flashed in his eyes. "You're the teacher everyone's been looking for. The whole town's been out searching." "They have." The words brought a fresh wave of tears. She had felt so alone, so forgotten. 3 days you've been missing. When you did not show up for church on Sunday, folks got worried. He broke off a small piece of jerky and offered it to her. "Try this." Small bites. She took it gratefully, though her stomach cramped at the first taste of food. "Who are you?" "Dalton Pierce. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of town. The sheriff organized search parties and I volunteered." He glanced back at the homestead, his expression darkening. "Did you see who put you down there?" "A man. Scarred face, brown hair. I was riding past when he grabbed me." She shivered despite the warmth of the day. "I don't know why." "Jack Hendricks," one of the other men said, riding closer. "Has to be. This was his family's place before they left. Word came through last week that he'd busted out of territorial prison down in Cannon City." Dalton's jaw tightened. What was he in for? Robbery, assault. He went in for 5 years, only served 2. The man, who Priscilla now recognized as Tom Baker from the general store, spat into the dust. "Always was a mean son of a gun. His family moved on from shame, but I guess Jack had other ideas." "Why would he take me?" Priscilla asked, her voice still weak. Dalton exchanged a look with Tom that she could not quite read. "Could be he planned to ransom you, or—" He trailed off, clearly unwilling to finish the thought in front of her. Doesn't matter. What matters is getting you to safety and finding Hendrix. I want to go home, she whispered. The weight of the past 3 days was crashing down on her now that the immediate danger had passed. Her body felt foreign, weak, and unsteady. Her dress was filthy, torn at the hem. Her hands were scraped raw from beating against the door, and she could smell the earthen dampness of the cellar clinging to her skin and hair. We'll get you there. Dalton stood, calling to his men. Tom, you and Bill ride back to town. Let folks know we found Miss Ashford. Tell Doc Martin to be ready. Jake and Sam, you two start tracking. See if you can pick up Hendricks' trail. He cannot have gone far. What about you, boss? Jake asked. I'm taking Miss Ashford home. She needs care more than I need to chase down Hendricks right now. When Jake looked like he might argue, Dalton's expression hardened. That's an order. The men dispersed quickly, splitting off to their assigned tasks. Dalton returned to Priscilla's side and offered her another small sip of water. My horse is gentle. Think you can manage to ride with me back to town? I'll manage. She had no intention of being carried like an invalid for 10 miles, though she suspected she might not have much choice in the matter. Dalton helped her to her feet, keeping a steadying hand on her elbow as she swayed. The world tilted alarmingly and she clutched at his arm. Maybe take a moment, he suggested gently. I'm fine, she insisted, though they both knew it was a lie. Sure you are. There was no mockery in his voice, only a kind of weary understanding. But let's take it slow anyway. He walked her to his horse, a magnificent bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. When they reached the animal's side, Dalton mounted first, then reached down for her. Put your foot in the stirrup and give me your hands. Priscilla obeyed, and he hauled her up with an ease that spoke of years of hard ranch work. She settled in front of him, side saddle since her dress made riding astride impossible. His arms came around her to grip the reins, encircling her in a way that felt both protective and strangely intimate. She could feel the solid warmth of his chest against her back, smell leather and sage and honest sweat. Ready? He asked near her ear. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He clicked his tongue and the horse started forward at an easy walk. The movement made her dizzy at first, but she leaned back against Dalton's solid frame and let him take her weight. His presence was an anchor, keeping her grounded as they left the abandoned homestead behind. For a while they rode in silence. The afternoon sun slanted golden across the valley, illuminating the peaks that ringed the basin. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. The landscape was so beautiful it made her chest ache. She had thought she might never see it again. Thank you, she said finally, for finding me. Just doing what anyone would do, not just anyone. You could have kept riding. She turned her head slightly to look at him. Why did you come looking? He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the trail ahead. Town like Fairplay, we take care of our own. When someone goes missing, everyone turns out. That's just how it is. You knew who I was when you found me. I've seen you around town. Hard to miss the pretty new schoolteacher. The words were matter of fact, not flirtatious, but they still brought heat to her cheeks. Besides, my sister Rachel talks about you all the time. She's 10, thinks you hung the moon. Priscilla smiled despite everything. She knew Rachel Pierce, a bright girl with her brother's striking eyes and a hunger for learning. She's a wonderful student, very gifted with numbers. Takes after our mother. She was good with figures too, kept all the ranch books. His voice softened slightly. She passed 2 years ago. Fever took her quick. I'm sorry. Priscilla knew the words were inadequate, but she offered them anyway. Loss was a language everyone in the West spoke fluently. Rachel's had a hard time without a woman around. Our father does his best, but it's not the same. Dalton shifted slightly in the saddle. Having you at the school, having a good teacher who cares about the students, it's meant a lot to her, to all the kids. They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence now. Priscilla felt herself relaxing despite her ordeal, lulled by the gentle rocking of the horse and the steady rhythm of its hoofbeats. Exhaustion pulled at her, 3 days of fear and sleeplessness demanding their due. Her eyes drifted closed. Hey now, stay awake. Dalton's voice cut through the fog. I need you to stay awake until Doc Martin can look at you all right. I'm so tired, she murmured. I know. But stay with me just a little longer. Tell me about Philadelphia. What made you leave? She forced her eyes open, recognizing the question for what it was, a lifeline to consciousness. There were too many people, too much noise. I wanted space to breathe. And you came to Colorado. I saw an advertisement for a teacher in Fairplay. The name seemed auspicious. She managed a weak laugh. I thought it would be an adventure. Is it what you expected? Some days yes, some days no. The winters are harder than I imagined. The altitude took some getting used to, but the children are wonderful and the people have been kind. She paused, remembering. Until 3 days ago, I felt safer here than I ever did in the city. Hendricks is an exception, not the rule. Most folks around here would cut off their own arm before they'd hurt a woman. Dalton's voice had gone hard again. What he did, taking you like that, leaving you to die in the dark, that's not how we do things. I kept hoping someone would find me, but as the hours passed, she could not finish the sentence. The memory was too fresh, too raw. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. But she found that she did want to, needed to give voice to the nightmare so it would stop echoing in her head. The darkness was absolute. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I lost track of time. Sometimes I thought I heard voices, footsteps overhead, but no one came. I thought perhaps I was imagining it, going mad from the isolation. Dalton's arm tightened fractionally around her. You're safe now. Am I? What if he comes back? What if he finds me again? He won't. The words were spoken with such absolute certainty that she almost believed them. My men will track him down. And until they do, I'll make sure you're protected. I give you my word. Priscilla wanted to ask how he could promise such a thing, what made him think he could keep her safe when she had proven so vulnerable. But she was too tired to argue, and some part of her, the part that had felt his strength as he carried her from the cellar, believed him. They rode on as the sun sank lower, turning the world amber and gold. The outskirts of Fairplay came into view, the cluster of buildings that made up the town proper. Priscilla could see the church steeple, the false front of the general store, the neat white schoolhouse where she taught. As they entered the main street, people began emerging from buildings, word of her rescue having preceded them. Miss Ashford, thank the Lord. Mrs. Henderson, the minister's wife, rushed forward with tears streaming down her face. Other voices joined in, a chorus of relief and concern. Dalton guided his horse to the doctor's office, a small building next to the barber shop. Let us through, folks. She needs medical attention. The crowd parted reluctantly. Dr. Samuel Martin appeared in his doorway, a thin man with silver hair and wire-rimmed spectacles. Bring her inside. Dalton dismounted and lifted Priscilla down carefully. Her legs tried to give out again, but he steadied her, half carrying her through the door and into the examination room. A padded table dominated the space, and he helped her onto it before stepping back. 3 days in the Hendricks root cellar, he told the doctor. Limited water, almost no food. She seems lucid but weak. Dr. Martin began his examination, checking her pulse, looking into her eyes, palpating her abdomen. Dehydrated, malnourished, but nothing that rest and care will not fix. I want her on bed rest for at least a week. Small, frequent meals, plenty of fluids. He turned to Priscilla. Did he hurt you? In any way? She understood what he was asking. No, he only grabbed me, drugged me with something on a cloth. When I woke, I was in the cellar. He came once to bring water and bread, but he did not touch me. The doctor's expression softened with relief. Small mercies. Still, you've been through an ordeal. Your body needs time to recover, and your mind too. I'll give you something to help you sleep tonight, something without nightmares if I can manage it. I don't want to sleep, she said quickly. The thought of darkness, of unconsciousness, terrified her. I understand, but you need rest. I promise you, you'll be safe. Mrs. Henderson has already volunteered to stay with you tonight. Priscilla wanted to protest further, but exhaustion was winning the battle. She nodded weakly. Dalton had remained by the door, watching the proceedings with those intense eyes. Now he stepped forward. I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Ashford. Make sure you're all right. You don't have to do that. You've done so much already. I want to. The simple statement held layers of meaning she was too tired to parse. Get some rest. He left before she could respond, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. Mrs. Henderson bustled in moments later, full of concern and gentle fussing. She helped Priscilla out of her filthy dress and into a clean nightgown, then walked her the short distance to the boarding house where Priscilla rented a room. The landlady, Mrs. Cooper, wept when she saw her, pressing a hand to Priscilla's cheek. We thought the worst, the older woman said. When you did not come home Saturday night, when your mare came back without you. I'm all right, Priscilla assured her, though she was not entirely sure it was true. They got her into bed, and Dr. Martin arrived with the promised medicine. She drank it down, tasting bitter herbs and honey. Within minutes, a pleasant heaviness spread through her limbs. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was Mrs. Henderson settling into the chair beside the bed, her knitting needles clicking a soothing rhythm in the gathering darkness. She woke to sunlight streaming through the lace curtains of her room. For a moment, panic seized her as memory returned. The cellar. The darkness. But then she saw Mrs. Henderson asleep in the chair, saw the familiar wallpaper with its pattern of tiny roses, and relief washed over her. She was home. She was safe. The movement of her sitting up woke Mrs. Henderson, who immediately began fussing. How do you feel, dear? Are you hungry? Thirsty? Both, Priscilla admitted. Her throat was still sore, her body weak, but the fog that had clouded her mind yesterday had lifted. Breakfast arrived courtesy of Mrs. Cooper. Eggs scrambled with cheese, toast with butter and jam, fresh milk and coffee. Priscilla ate slowly, her stomach protesting the richness after days of deprivation. But it was the best food she had ever tasted. After eating, she insisted on washing. Mrs. Henderson helped her heat water and fill the basin, then discreetly withdrew while Priscilla bathed. She scrubbed every inch of her skin, washing away the smell of earth and fear, shampooing her hair 3 times until it squeaked clean. When she finally emerged, dressed in a simple blue calico dress, she felt more like herself. The day passed quietly. Friends and neighbors stopped by with food and well wishes. The sheriff came to take her statement about the attack, his expression growing grimmer as she described her captor. Jack Hendricks, without a doubt, he confirmed. We've got men searching, but he knows this country well, could be holed up anywhere. The thought sent a chill through her, but she tried not to show it. As afternoon stretched toward evening, there was a knock at her door. Mrs. Henderson answered it, and Priscilla heard a familiar, deep voice. Is Miss Ashford receiving visitors? Her pulse quickened. Yes, please, let him in. Dalton entered carrying his hat in his hands, his dark hair slightly damp as though he had recently washed. He had cleaned up since yesterday, trading his dusty trail clothes for a pressed shirt and clean trousers. The effect was striking. Priscilla found herself noticing details she had been too dazed to register before. The strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, the capable hands that had held her so carefully. "Miss Ashford, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all. Please sit." She gestured to the chair Mrs. Henderson had vacated. He sat, perching on the edge as though ready to bolt at any moment. "I wanted to see how you were recovering. You look better. Less like you'd been through a windstorm." She laughed, surprised by the observation. "I feel better. Dr. Martin says I should make a full recovery. That's good. That's real good." He turned his hat in his hands, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I know the sheriff already talked to you, but I wanted to let you know personally. We're still tracking Hendricks. We'll find him." "I appreciate that. It helps to know people are looking." She hesitated, then added, "It also helps to know you kept your word, that you came back to check on me." "Said I would." His eyes met hers and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the bond forged in crisis. "I'll keep checking if that's all right with you, until Hendricks is caught and you feel safe again." "I'd like that." The admission felt significant, though she could not articulate why. They talked for a while longer, the conversation flowing more easily than she expected. He told her about his ranch, about the challenges of raising cattle at high altitude, about his father and sister. She found herself sharing stories about her students, about the satisfaction of watching children master new concepts, about her hopes for the school. The light in the room shifted as the sun moved across the sky, and she realized with surprise that over an hour had passed. "I should let you rest," Dalton said, standing. "Doctor's orders. Will you come back tomorrow?" The question slipped out before she could think better of it. He smiled, a slow expression that transformed his serious face. "Wild horses could not keep me away." After he left, Mrs. Henderson gave her a knowing look. "He's a good man, that Dalton Pierce. Took over his father's ranch when he was barely 20, built it into something substantial. He's well regarded hereabouts." "I'm simply grateful he found me," Priscilla said, but she felt heat creeping into her cheeks. "Of course, dear." Mrs. Henderson's tone suggested she thought there was more to it than gratitude, and perhaps she was right. The week that followed established a pattern. Dalton came every afternoon, timing his visits to coincide with the end of the day's ranch work. They would sit in her room or, as she grew stronger, on the porch of the boarding house, and they would talk. She learned that he had a quick mind and a dry wit, that he loved the land with a fierce passion, that he carried the weight of responsibility for his family and his men with quiet determination. In turn, she shared her own dreams and fears, her love of books, her satisfaction in teaching. On the 5th day, he brought his sister Rachel, a whirlwind of energy and concern. "Miss Ashford, I was so worried. Dalton would not let me visit before because he said you needed rest, but I made him bring me today." "I'm glad you're here," Priscilla said warmly. Rachel threw her arms around her in an impulsive hug, and Priscilla felt something in her chest tighten. She had no siblings of her own, no family out west at all. This girl's affection touched her deeply. They spent the afternoon together, the three of them. Rachel chattered about school starting again in the fall, about the foal that had been born on the ranch last week, about everything and nothing. Dalton watched his sister with open fondness, occasionally interjecting to correct some wild exaggeration. When it was time to leave, Rachel extracted a promise that Priscilla would come visit the ranch once she was fully recovered. "I'd like that very much," Priscilla said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. After they left, she sat on the porch and thought about how much her life had changed in less than a week. The terror of the cellar was beginning to fade, replaced by something else. She was aware of Dalton in a way she had never been aware of any man before. The way he looked at her, the care he showed in his words and actions, the strength tempered with gentleness, All of it drew her like a lodestone. But was it real, or was it simply the aftermath of trauma? Was she confusing gratitude with something deeper? She had no answers, only questions that kept her awake long into the night. On the seventh day, Dr. Martin pronounced her recovered enough to resume light activities. No teaching yet, he cautioned. But gentle walks, visiting with friends, that sort of thing is fine. Listen to your body. If you feel tired, rest. Priscilla celebrated her freedom by walking to the general store, Mrs. Henderson accompanying her for propriety's sake. The sun was bright, the air crisp and clean. She filled her lungs with it, grateful for the simple act of breathing fresh air. At the store, Tom Baker greeted her warmly. "Good to see you up and about, Miss Ashford. Whole town's been praying for you. Thank you. Everyone has been so kind." She purchased thread and fabric, planning to make a new dress to replace the one ruined in the cellar. As they left the store, a rider came thundering down the main street. It was Jake, one of Dalton's ranch hands. He pulled up hard in front of the sheriff's office, shouting for the lawman. Priscilla's heart began to pound. "What is it?" she called out. "What's happened?" Jake saw her and his expression tightened. "Sorry, Miss Ashford. Didn't mean to alarm you. We found tracks, sign that Hendricks is holed up in an old line shack up in the high country. Sheriffs organizing a posse." Relief and fear warred within her. Relief that they had found him, fear of what might happen when they did. Will it be dangerous? Could be. Man like Hendricks, cornered and desperate, there's no telling what he might do. Jake tipped his hat and turned back to the sheriff's office. "Mrs." Henderson steered Priscilla back toward the boarding house. "Come now, dear. This is men's business. Best we stay out of it." But Priscilla could not shake her unease. When Dalton arrived that afternoon, she greeted him with poorly concealed anxiety. "Jake said you found Hendricks. We think so. Tracks lead up to an old shack on the western slope of Mount Silverheels. Sheriff's putting together a posse to bring him in." He paused, studying her face. "I'll be riding with them." "When?" "Dawn tomorrow." "Is it safe?" The question sounded foolish even to her own ears. Of course it was not safe. "I'll be careful." He reached out and took her hand, the gesture both comforting and electrifying. "He needs to be brought to justice, Priscilla. What he did to you, it cannot stand." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips made her breath catch. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me. This is not just about you, though I will not pretend that's not part of it." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "He's a danger to everyone. We have to stop him before he hurts someone else." She knew he was right, but that did not make it easier. "Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." He held her gaze, and she saw determination there, but also something warmer, something that made her pulse race. "When I get back, there's something I want to talk to you about, something important." "What is it?" "Let me get through tomorrow first, then we'll talk." He squeezed her hand once and released it. "I should go. Need to get supplies ready for the morning." After he left, Priscilla found she could not settle. She paced her room, tried to read, tried to sew. Nothing held her attention. Her mind kept conjuring images of Dalton riding into danger, of gunfire and blood. She had only known him a week, but the thought of him being hurt, or worse, was unbearable. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in bed watching moonlight creep across the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the town settling down for the night. She thought about the man who had carried her from darkness into light, whose visits had become the highlight of her days. Gratitude had definitely grown into something more, something that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. Dawn came gray and cool. Priscilla dressed quickly and slipped out of the boarding house before anyone else was awake. She walked to the edge of town where the posse was gathering. A dozen men sat on horseback, checking weapons and supplies. The sheriff was giving instructions, his voice low and serious. She spotted Dalton immediately. He sat his bay gelding with easy confidence, a rifle in a scabbard on his saddle, a revolver at his hip. He saw her and his expression softened. He dismounted and walked over. "You should not be out here," he said, but there was no censure in his voice. "I had to see you before you left." She could not explain the compulsion, the need to see him one more time. He glanced around, aware of the watching eyes, then took her hand and led her a few steps away from the group. "I meant what I said. I'll be careful. Come back safe." Her voice broke slightly on the words. "Please." Something shifted in his eyes, an emotion so intense it took her breath away. "Priscilla, He stopped, seeming to struggle with himself. "When I get back, I need to tell you something. I need you to know that this past week, getting to know you, it's meant more to me than I can properly express right now." Her heart was hammering so hard she thought he must hear it. "It's meant a lot to me too." "Good. That's good." He reached up and, with infinite gentleness, touched her cheek. "Wait for me. I will." He mounted up and rejoined the posse. As they rode out, he looked back once, his eyes finding hers across the distance. She raised her hand in farewell and watched until they disappeared from sight. The day that followed was the longest of her life. She tried to occupy herself with mending, with reading, with helping Mrs. Cooper around the boarding house. Nothing worked. Her mind remained fixed on the mountain, on what might be happening in the high country. Other women in town were similarly anxious. The posse included husbands, sons, brothers. Everyone waited. Evening came with no word. Priscilla sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the peaks in shades of rose and gold. Mrs. Henderson brought her supper, but she could barely eat. She stared at the western mountains, willing the men to come home safe. Full darkness had fallen when a shout went up from the north end of town. "They're back! The posse is coming in!" Priscilla leaped to her feet and rushed toward the main street, propriety forgotten. Other women were emerging from houses, lanterns bobbing in the darkness. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, and then the riders appeared, moving at a walk. She counted them frantically, heart in her throat. 11, 12. Everyone was there. Relief made her knees weak. Then she saw him. Dalton rode near the front, upright in the saddle, apparently unharmed. Their eyes met across the crowd, and she saw her own relief mirrored in his face. The sheriff was speaking, his voice carrying in the night air. "We got him. Hendricks is in custody. He'll be transported to Denver for trial. Nobody was hurt." Cheers erupted from the gathered crowd. Wives rushed to embrace husbands. Priscilla stood frozen, watching as Dalton dismounted. He handed his reins to Jake and started toward her, weaving through the crowd with single-minded purpose. When he reached her, he did not speak. He simply pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. She pressed her face against his chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart, inhaling the scent of him mixed with dust and horse and sweat. It should have been unpleasant, but instead felt like coming home. "You're all right," she whispered. "I'm fine. It went smoothly." He did not even fight when we surrounded the shack. His arms tightened around her. "I was worried about you. I know today must have been hard. I was terrified something would happen to you." The admission cost her, but it felt necessary. He pulled back just enough to look down at her face. Around them, the crowd was dispersing, people heading home now that the excitement was over. They stood in a pool of lantern light, and Priscilla was acutely aware that they were being watched, that this public embrace would fuel gossip for weeks. She did not care. "Priscilla, I said I had something to tell you." Dalton's voice was low, meant only for her. "I need you to understand something. When I found you in that cellar, when I carried you out into the light, something happened to me. I've thought about nothing but you since that day. Getting to know you this week, it's only confirmed what I felt from the start." Her breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm falling in love with you. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. His hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. I want to court you properly if you'll let me. I want to see where this leads. Joy bloomed in her chest, so intense it was almost painful. I want that too. I've been so confused, wondering if what I was feeling was real or just a response to what happened. But it's real. You're real. This is real. Then we're agreed. His smile was brilliant in the lamplight. I'm going to court you, Priscilla Ashford, and I'm going to do it right. He kissed her then, a brief, chaste press of lips that nonetheless sent heat racing through her veins. When he pulled back, she was breathless. Someone in the dispersing crowd whooped, and they both laughed, the sound breaking the tension. I should let you get home, Dalton said reluctantly. It's been a long day for both of us. Will I see you tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that? He took her hand and brought it to his lips. You are not getting rid of me, schoolteacher. I wouldn't dream of trying. He walked her back to the boarding house, their fingers intertwined. At the door, he kissed her hand again. Sleep well. You too. She watched him walk away, his figure fading into the darkness. When she turned to go inside, she found Mrs. Cooper and Mrs. Henderson watching from the parlor window, both wearing identical expressions of delight. Oh, my dear girl, Mrs. Cooper said. How wonderful! Priscilla could not contain her smile. It is, isn't it? She went to bed that night with a light heart, her earlier exhaustion forgotten. The nightmares that had plagued her sleep since the cellar did not come. Instead, she dreamed of blue-green eyes and strong arms, of a future that shimmered with possibility. The courtship that followed was the talk of fair play. Dalton was true to his word about doing things properly. He called on her every day, bringing flowers from the meadows, taking her on walks around town, sitting with her in the parlor under Mrs. Cooper's watchful eye. On Sundays, he attended church with his family and always saved her a seat in the Pierce family pew. Rachel was over the moon, declaring to anyone who would listen that Priscilla was going to be her sister. She's getting ahead of herself, Dalton said with a laugh one afternoon as they walked along Beaver Creek. I have not even proposed yet. Yet, Priscilla's heart skipped. He grinned at her. You heard me. 2 weeks after Hendrick's capture, Dalton invited Priscilla to visit the ranch. He came to collect her in a wagon with Rachel bouncing excitedly on the seat beside him. The ride north took the better part of an hour, winding through terrain that grew increasingly rugged and beautiful. The ranch itself took her breath away. Nestled in a valley with mountains rising on 3 sides, the property encompassed meadows thick with grass, stands of aspen and pine, and a clear stream that sparkled in the sunlight. The house was a sturdy log structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Dalton's father, Daniel Pierce, came out to greet them. He was an older version of his son, with silver threading his dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes. So you're the young lady who's stolen my boy's heart, he said, shaking Priscilla's hand. Welcome to the Pierce Ranch. Thank you for having me, Mr. Pierce. Call me Daniel. Mr. Pierce makes me feel ancient, he winked at her. Come inside. Rachel's been baking all morning, determined to show off. The interior of the house was warm and welcoming, if decidedly masculine in its lack of decorative touches. Rachel had indeed been baking, and the kitchen table groaned with cookies, pies, and cakes. They ate lunch together, the 4 of them, and Priscilla felt a sense of belonging she had not experienced since leaving Philadelphia. This felt like family. After lunch, Dalton took her on a tour of the ranch. He showed her the barn where newborn calves sheltered with their mothers, the pastures where the main herd grazed, the break in the trees that offered a view clear to the distant Continental Divide. His pride in the land was evident in every word. every gesture. My grandfather homesteaded this land back in 1862, he told her. Built the first cabin with his own hands. My father expanded it, and I've been working to improve the herd, bring in better breeding stock. It's hard work, but I cannot imagine doing anything else. It's beautiful, she said honestly. I can see why you love it. They stood on a small rise overlooking the valley. The afternoon sun slanted golden across the grass, and the wind carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. Dalton turned to her, his expression serious. I want to show you something. He took her hand and led her to a flat area near the house, where the foundation of a building had been laid. I started this last year before my mother died. It was going to be a new house for Rachel when she got older, a place of her own. But I've been thinking I might finish it for a different purpose. Priscilla looked at the foundation, at the careful placement of stones, and understanding dawned. Dalton, I know we have not been courting long. I know by all rights I should wait months, maybe a year before I say this, but I'm not a patient man, Priscilla, and I know what I want. He took both her hands in his. I want you. I want to finish this house and fill it with our family. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to grow old on this land with you by my side. Her eyes filled with tears. Are you asking me to marry you? Yes. I'm asking you to be my wife, to be a mother to Rachel, to help me build a life here. His voice was rough with emotion. I love you, Priscilla Ashford. I have from the moment I saw you in that cellar, so brave despite your fear. Will you marry me? The answer came without hesitation. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. His whoop of joy startled a flock of birds from a nearby tree. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her properly for the first time, a deep, thorough kiss that left her dizzy and wanting more. I don't have a ring yet, he said when they finally broke apart. I'll get you a proper one, I promise. I don't need a ring. I just need you. She touched his face, marveling that this strong, good man was going to be her husband. They walked back to the house hand in hand to share the news. Rachel screamed with delight and threw herself at both of them. Daniel shook Dalton's hand, then pulled his son into a hug. Your mother would be so happy, he said, his voice thick. She always wanted to see you settled with a good woman. The ride back to town was a blur of plans and dreams. They decided on a September wedding, giving them time to finish the house and for Priscilla to prepare. School would start in August, and she would teach through the fall term before turning her duties over to a replacement the school board would need to hire. The news spread through Fairplay like wildfire. Well-wishers stopped by constantly. Mrs. Cooper threw an engagement party at the boarding house. The women of the town began organizing, offering to help with dressmaking, cooking for the reception, decorating the church. Priscilla was overwhelmed by the generosity and support. August arrived with warm days and cool nights. School started, and Priscilla threw herself into teaching with renewed passion, knowing these would be her last months in the classroom. Her students were thrilled for her, especially Rachel, who told everyone that she had known all along her brother would marry Miss Ashford. The weeks flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. Dalton and his men worked tirelessly on the new house, racing to have it finished before the wedding. Priscilla spent her evenings sewing, creating a wedding dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Henderson helped her design. She also made curtains for the new house, quilts for the bed, all the small touches that would make it a home. Throughout it all, she and Dalton spent every possible moment together. They took long rides into the mountains, had picnics by Beaver Creek, talked for hours about their hopes and dreams. She learned his moods, his habits, the things that made him laugh and the things that worried him. He learned hers in turn. The connection between them deepened and strengthened, moving beyond the initial spark of attraction into something more profound. One evening in late August, they sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sunset. Rachel had gone to bed, and Daniel was in his workshop. They were alone for once, a rare luxury. "Are you happy?" Dalton asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Happier than I ever thought possible." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life. 6 months ago, I was just a schoolteacher, alone in a new place. Now I have you and Rachel and Daniel. I have a family." "We're the lucky ones," he insisted. "You could have chosen anyone. You chose me. There was never any other choice. From the moment you carried me out of that cellar, I was yours." She turned to look at him. "I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true." "It does not sound dramatic. It sounds like how I feel." He kissed her temple. 3 more weeks, 3 more weeks, and you'll be my wife. I cannot wait." September 15, 1878, dawned clear and bright, the air carrying the first real chill of approaching autumn. Priscilla woke in her room at the boarding house for the last time, her stomach fluttering with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Today she would marry Dalton Pierce. Today her new life would truly begin. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Cooper helped her dress, lacing her into the ivory silk gown with its delicate lace sleeves and pearl buttons. They arranged her hair in an elegant updo, weaving in wildflowers that Dalton had picked from the meadow. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked radiant, transformed by love and happiness. The church was packed when she arrived. It seemed the entire town had turned out for the wedding. Flowers decorated every available surface, their fragrance filling the air. At the front, Dalton waited with his father and the minister. He wore a new suit, his hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven. When he saw her walking down the aisle on Mr. Henderson's arm, his expression took her breath away. Such love, such joy, such absolute certainty. The ceremony passed in a blur. She heard herself saying the vows, felt Dalton slip a gold ring onto her finger, tasted salt when he kissed her, and she realized she was crying. Then they were walking back down the aisle as husband and wife, and the congregation was cheering. The reception was held in the church hall, with tables laden with food and a space cleared for dancing. Priscilla was swept into a whirlwind of congratulations, dancing first with Dalton, then with Daniel, then with what seemed like every man in fair play. But always her eyes sought out her husband, finding him across the room, his gaze finding hers in return. As the afternoon wore on, Dalton finally claimed her for good. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Home." The word sent a thrill through her. "Yes." They said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon, which had been decorated with ribbons and tin cans by helpful friends. The noise followed them out of town, but once they reached the open road, blessed quiet descended. Dalton reached for her hand. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Pierce?" "Perfect." She squeezed his fingers. "How does it feel to be married?" "Like the best decision I ever made." They arrived at the ranch as the sun was setting. The new house stood waiting, smoke rising from its chimney. Daniel had lit a fire for them before taking Rachel into town to stay with friends for the night, giving the newlyweds privacy. Dalton lifted Priscilla down from the wagon, and then, in a gesture that echoed their first meeting, swept her into his arms. "I believe I'm supposed to carry you over the threshold." She laughed and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Then by all means carry me." He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The house glowed in the light of oil lamps Daniel had lit. Priscilla looked around in wonder. The main room held a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and her curtains hanging in the windows. A hallway led to bedrooms at the back. Everything was clean and new and ready for them to make it their own. Dalton set her on her feet but kept his arms around her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Pierce." She reached up and touched his face, tracing the lines of it with her fingers. "Thank you for finding me, for saving me, for loving me. Always." He leaned down and kissed her slowly, thoroughly, his hands moving to the buttons at the back of her dress. "I love you, Priscilla. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. I love you too." She began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly with nerves and anticipation. Show me how much." He did, carrying her to their bedroom where he proceeded to demonstrate with exquisite thoroughness exactly how much he loved his bride. The outside world faded away, leaving only the two of them, discovering each other in the firelight, learning the language of touch and sighs. It was tender and passionate, and sometimes clumsy, both of them navigating new territory, but it was theirs, this intimate connection that sealed their marriage in a way words never could. Later, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Priscilla felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She thought about the girl who had arrived in Fairplay 6 months ago, lonely and uncertain. She thought about the terror of the cellar, the darkness that had nearly consumed her. And she thought about the cowboy who had broken down the door and carried her into the light. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "About how everything happens for a reason. If I had not been taken, if you had not found me, we might never have met. We might have passed each other in town 100 times and never really seen each other. I would have seen you eventually. You're impossible to miss." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "But I know what you mean. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. We found each other because of a tragedy, but what we've built, that's all ours." "Yes," she nestled closer to him. "That's exactly it." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, secure in their love and in the life they were building together. The months that followed were a time of adjustment and joy. Priscilla learned the rhythms of ranch life, waking before dawn to help with breakfast, managing the household, caring for Rachel. She threw herself into being a wife and stepmother, discovering a satisfaction in the work that surprised her. She had loved teaching, but this felt different, more personal, more vital. Daniel moved into a small cabin on the property, giving the new family their own space. He remained involved in ranch operations, but increasingly deferred to Dalton's judgment. Rachel blossomed under Priscilla's care, the girl's natural brightness enhanced by having a maternal figure in her life again. Winter came early that year, blanketing the high country in snow by October. Priscilla experienced her first true Colorado winter as a ranch wife, learning to cope with frozen pipes, drifts that buried the fences, and temperatures that made her Philadelphia winters seem mild by comparison. But there was beauty in it too, the way the morning sun turned the snow to diamonds, the silence that descended over the valley on still nights, the coziness of being snowed in with the people she loved. Spring arrived in a rush of melting snow and mud that made every task twice as hard. But it also brought new calves, green grass, and wildflowers that carpeted the meadows. Priscilla discovered she was pregnant in April, the news filling the household with excitement. Dalton was beside himself with joy, hovering over her protectively until she laughingly told him she was not made of glass. Their son was born in January of 1879, during a blizzard that trapped the midwife at the ranch for 3 days. They named him Thomas Daniel Pierce, after both his grandfathers. He was a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes, and he completed their family in a way Priscilla had not even known was missing. The years that followed brought challenges and triumphs. The ranch prospered under Dalton's management. They expanded the herd, improved the land, and built a reputation for quality cattle. Two more children arrived, a daughter named Sarah in 1881 and another son, Michael, in 1883. Rachel grew into a beautiful young woman, eventually marrying a neighboring rancher's son and starting her own family. Through it all, Priscilla and Dalton's love deepened and matured. The passionate intensity of their early days mellowed into something steadier but no less profound. They learned to navigate disagreements, to support each other through losses and setbacks, to celebrate victories together. They became partners in the truest sense, building a life and a legacy that would endure. On their 10th anniversary, Dalton took Priscilla back to the place where they had first met, the abandoned Hendricks homestead. It had been reclaimed by a new family now, the fields green with crops, children's laughter ringing from the house. They stood by the old root cellar, which had been filled in years ago. Priscilla felt no fear looking at it now, only gratitude for the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. "You ever regret it?" Dalton asked. "Giving up teaching, the independence you had?" "Never." She took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I gained so much more than I gave up. I have you, I have our children, I have a family and a home. How could I regret any of that? I just want you to be happy." "I am happy. Happier than I ever imagined possible." She leaned her head on his shoulder, looking out over the valley. "You saved my life in that cellar, Dalton, but you did more than that. You gave me a reason to live it." He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "You saved mine, too. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working the ranch, raising Rachel, but never really living. You brought color and light and laughter into my world. You made me whole." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built something beautiful from that darkness. Two people who had learned that love could bloom anywhere, even in the cold earth of a root cellar, if you were brave enough to reach for it. Years later, when their grandchildren gathered around asking for stories, Priscilla and Dalton would tell them about the summer of 1878. About a schoolteacher locked in darkness, and the cowboy who broke down the door to save her. About how the worst moment of her life had led to the best thing in both their lives. They would tell the story with smiles and clasped hands, the love between them as evident at 70 as it had been at 22 and 27. The root cellar was long gone, filled in and forgotten by everyone except the two people whose lives it had irrevocably changed. In its place grew wildflowers, bluebells and columbines and Indian paintbrush, their beauty hiding any trace of the darkness that had once existed there. It seemed fitting somehow, this transformation from despair to hope, from fear to love. Priscilla often thought about that girl she had been, trapped and terrified, believing she would die alone in the dark. She wished she could go back and tell her to hold on, that help was coming. That a cowboy with blue-green eyes would soon break down that door and carry her not just to safety, but to a future more wonderful than any dream. That the darkness was temporary, but the love she would find would be forever. But perhaps that young woman had known in some deep part of herself. Perhaps that was why she had kept fighting, kept hoping, kept believing that someone would come. Because the human heart knows things the mind cannot grasp, understands connections that defy logic. Her heart had been calling out in that darkness, and Dalton's heart had answered. Their story became part of Fairplay's history, told and retold over the years. Some details changed with each telling, embellished or simplified, but the core remained the same. A woman in danger, a man who saved her, love that bloomed in the aftermath of terror. It was the kind of story people wanted to believe in, proof that even in the harsh reality of the West, romance and heroism still existed. As Priscilla watched her children and grandchildren grow, as she and Dalton aged together, she never forgot the lesson of that long-ago summer. That life could change in an instant, that darkness and light existed side by side. That love, when it came, should be grasped with both hands and never taken for granted. She had learned these truths in the most visceral way possible, and they shaped everything that came after. On a warm July evening in 1918, 40 years after that fateful summer, Priscilla sat on the porch of their home with Dalton beside her. He was 71 now, his hair silver, his face deeply lined by decades of sun and wind. She was 62, her own hair more gray than brown, her hands marked by years of work. But when he reached for her hand, the gesture was exactly the same as it had always been. Certain, loving, complete. "You remember what day it is?" she asked. "The day I carried you out of that cellar." 40 years ago today. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a habit he had never broken. "Best day of my life, though I know it was your worst." "It was both," she said honestly. "The worst and the beginning of the best. I don't think one could have existed without the other." Their children had arranged a celebration for their 40th anniversary next month. There would be a party, family coming from across Colorado and beyond. But this moment, this quiet evening with just the two of them, felt more meaningful than any celebration. This was their real anniversary, the day their lives had truly intersected, the day everything changed. "I love you," Dalton said, the words as fresh and true as the first time he had spoken them. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you." Priscilla squeezed his hand. "Thank you for breaking down that door. Thank you for being worth saving." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, one by one, diamonds scattered across the velvet sky. The ranch stretched out around them, acres of land they had tended and nurtured for 4 decades. Buildings they had built, fences they had mended, gardens they had planted. All of it was a testament to their partnership, their love, their commitment to building something that would last. Inside the house, a lamp glowed warm in the window. Their youngest son, Michael, lived there now with his wife and children, carrying on the family legacy. Rachel visited often with her growing brood. Sarah lived in Denver but came home for every holiday. The house was full of life and love, exactly as they had dreamed it would be that September night so long ago. As Priscilla sat there with her husband's hand in hers, she thought about all the moments that had led them here. The terror of the cellar, yes, but also the first time Dalton had smiled at her, the first time he had kissed her, their wedding day, the birth of each of their children, 1,000 small moments of joy and struggle and triumph. All of it woven together into the tapestry of their life, each thread essential to the pattern. She would not change any of it, not even the darkness, because the darkness had been necessary to help her appreciate the light. Jack Hendricks had been captured that summer of 1878, had been tried and sent to prison where he eventually died. The fear he had caused was real, but it was also finite. The love that had grown from that terrible experience was infinite, expanding and deepening with each passing year. This was the real miracle, Priscilla thought. Not that Dalton had found her, though that was miraculous enough, but that they had taken that traumatic beginning and transformed it into something beautiful. That they had refused to let fear and darkness define them, choosing instead to build a life filled with light and love. That they had honored the gift of their survival by living fully, loving deeply, and raising a family that would carry their values forward into the future. As the evening deepened into night, they finally went inside, Dalton's arm around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. They moved through the familiar rooms of their home, putting out lamps, checking locks, performing the small rituals of a shared life. In their bedroom, they helped each other undress, no longer self-conscious after 40 years of intimacy. They climbed into the bed they had shared for so long, and Dalton pulled her close. "Good night, my love," he whispered into her hair. "Good night," she replied, her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. They fell asleep as they had for 40 years, wrapped around each other, two people who had become one. The story that had begun in a root cellar in the summer of 1878 continued on, not with dramatic rescues or grand gestures, but with the quiet persistence of love. The kind of love that endures through seasons and years, through challenges and changes, constant as the mountains that surrounded their valley, as enduring as the land they had made their own. And somewhere in the darkness, in a place that existed only in memory, a door hung open, broken and splintered. Light poured through that opening, illuminating the space where despair had once lived, where hope had flickered and nearly died. But it had not died. It had been saved, rescued, carried into the light by a cowboy who became a husband, a father, a partner for life. This was their story, their truth, their legacy. From darkness to light, from fear to love, from a locked cellar to a life fully lived. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. And as Priscilla drifted into sleep, held safe in her husband's arms, she smiled, knowing that some stories really do have happy endings after all.